Good evening. I usually say good evening, Farrington Democrats, but tonight I'm saying good evening, nonpartisans, because that's what this election is. There are a couple of chairs up here if you all want to sit down. So welcome to the Farrington Gathering Place and the Zoom audiences to this forum sponsored by the Farrington Democratic Club for Chatham County Board of Education candidates. I'm Vicki Shea. I'm the chair of the Farrington Democratic Party. Just a couple of reminders, please turn off club, right. This is Sherry DeRosia, who I called Sherry Beasley last time. So we're starting off well. Okay, anyway, please turn off your cell phones. And during the question and answer period, please wait for the microphones. People think their voice is loud enough, and it never is for people our age with our hearing. So please, somebody will come around with the microphone and then. Right, actually, this is being Zoomed live, and the recording will be available on the club website within a couple of days, which is farringtondems.org. So please wait for the microphone. So just as background, as I said, the Board of Education election is nonpartisan, meaning that candidates are not identified on the ballot by their political party, and they didn't have a primary. This is the election. Okay, no primary, no not election to come. This is it. There are 3 seats open this year. By law, the candidates have to come from specific districts, but we vote in all the contests. Okay, so if it's on your ballot, you can vote for it. Okay, don't worry about what the district lines are. That's been taken care of at the Board of Elections. So there are 3 candidates for seat 3, and one of them is Clifford Stickney, who is not here, obviously, so we'll see. And then Del Turner, who's the incumbent, and Jessica Winger, who's a candidate for seat 3. There's one candidate who's unopposed for seat 4, which is why she's out there in the hinterlands, just in that solitary chair. And then there are 2 candidates for seat 5, Gary Leonard, who's the incumbent, and Tim Moore. And you all have this little tiny piece of paper that is going to be your visual cue for who's talking, who you're listening to. And is this our candidate by any chance? No, okay, all right, welcome. Okay, so we're going to start by asking all of the candidates, including Jane Allen Wilson, for a 2-minute opening statement. Then we have prepared 5 questions that all of the candidates in contested races will have 1 minute to answer. So Jane Allen is finished, and at some point she might depart, or she might not. And after these questions that the club has developed, then there will be time for the audience members to ask questions. And that's when you wait for the microphone, or when the people listening on Zoom type their questions into the chat. And Chris Kamen, who's monitoring the technology for us tonight, will ask the question, and then you can answer it. We do have a friendly timekeeper who is now going to demonstrate how friendly she is. This is Sherry DeRosia, who will give people a 20-second warning. Right. But then, so she's friendly, and we're not going to, cut your mic. But on the other hand, we need to give everybody a chance to speak and to ask questions. Okay. Right. So for opening statements, if you'd please introduce yourself and tell us if you have a platform or issues of particular interest to you. And I think we'll start with Jane Allen Wilson. Right. Could you come to the podium? Yeah. And actually, I have told all of them that they can take off their masks when they're speaking at the podium.
So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to report to you that you're guaranteed a Democrat in District 4 since I'm running unopposed. But I'm just so honored to be here and see all of you, and I encourage you to reach out if you have concerns or questions or ideas, anything. I'm very grateful to serve with Dale Turner and Gary Leonard. We work together so well, and we have a lot of thoughtful discussion and don't leave stones unturned together. So I appreciate running as a team with them. I grew up in Chatham County. I've spent most of my adult life here, except for 2 years living in the Dominican Republic and going off to school. I worked in politics under U.S. Senator Terry Sanford and was the co-clerk to the House Committee on Finance under George Miller and Joe Hackney. But I spent most of my life working with victims of adult and child victims of domestic and sexual violence and child abuse and some trafficking issues. And half of that, of 24 years of that was spent here in Chatham County, working directly with families here in courtroom settings and home-based settings and shelter settings and school settings, and getting a sense of some of the extra challenges that teachers have on their shoulders. So I'm deeply concerned about the well-being of our kids and want to make sure kids are safe academically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, physically, and also culturally. So I'm going to continue to work as we revamp and look at our policies and practices to make sure kids are culturally safe in our schools. And I know I'm probably getting close to time, but I'm very concerned about our teachers and making sure we attract and sustain good teachers. And that's one of my big issues. And I'm grateful to the county commissioners for supporting us around that. So thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to go left and right, and everybody's going to get a chance to go first. So how about if you go next?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Moore, and I'm running for District 5 of the Board of Education. And my background is I grew up in Latin America, so I'm bilingual in Spanish. My parents worked for the government. My dad did. And then after that, I was in the U.S. Army for a number of years, and I spent time in Italy and Germany. And I've raised my wife and I, who is back there. She served in the Army also. Very proud Army. I met her in the Army. That was the best thing I got from the Army. So we raised 5 children, and now we have 3 grandchildren. And my wife, who running for the Board of Education, is back there sitting next to her. It's my granddaughter Emma, who just started kindergarten. Looking forward to her bright future. We've been married for 35 years, and we've lived in Chatham County for about 15 years. So my platform is really about education excellence. I've got some information back there. It's not my information. I didn't come up with it. The first one is from the Pew Research Group, which is a nonpartisan, non-biased group. Probably some of you have heard of them. And their data shows that we're not in the top 20 of education of anywhere in the world. There's countries like Macau. I don't know if you know where Macau is, but it's the gambling capital of Asia. So the bottom line is we have a lot of work to do in education. And I'll share a personal story here in a little bit, but we have to do better in our education system with our children to compete on a global basis. Another little bit of research I have back there is from a group called the World Population Review. They review a lot of things all over the world. And they basically say that North Carolina is not even in the top 30 of the states. And then the last bit of research I have from a little company down the road called SAS, who says that Chatham is not even in the top 30 of education for the state. So my line is we need to invest both human elements and financial elements into our education system to increase that, because we will not compete anywhere in the world. Thank you. Tim Moore.
Good evening. I'm Gary Leonard. My background is as an educator. I'm a retired educator for 40 years. Grew up in Chatham County, came back and lived here. My wife was also a retired educator. I feel like that I've been on the, it seems like with the board, I've been here since 2010. I've been our chairman since 2014. As Mr. Moore said, we always have work to do with our schools. We want to improve. Coming off the last few years, there's more work to do. We want to make sure we look after our students socially and emotionally. We want to make sure that we look after our teachers and continue, I guess, platform wise, I would continue to lobby for more funding from the state as far as, especially for teacher salary. We rank 43rd, I think, in the United States in teacher salary. Of course, you can look at different rankings all over and they jump around, but I do feel like those are things that we need to work through. I have been able, experience wise, have worked with 4 superintendents, have helped with hiring 3. We have a world-class superintendent, Dr. Anthony Jackson, right now that I look forward to serving with if reelected. I really feel like he will push our county to great levels with new programs and new innovations. So it's Gary Leonard. I'm Region or District 5, and thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here tonight. My name is Jessica Winger. I am a mom of 4 kids who attend Chatham County schools, elementary school, middle school, and high school this year. So we are spread. I am a wife of 16 years, and I'm also a substitute teacher. I became a substitute teacher this past year when I really saw our teachers struggling and them really needing more support. There was a call for more subs. And so I signed right up, and that was really eye-opening, really getting in the classroom, not just seeing having that parent's perspective, but seeing the perspective of the teachers and what they're going through right now. So I have actually attended board meetings for the past 2 years. I became involved really at the beginning of the pandemic, when virtual learning became a thing, and I saw not only my kids struggle, but so many kids struggle. And I really felt the push to find out about the school board, the decisions they were making, and how they, it was impacting, and seeing how it was impacting my kids. And so that's when I started attending board meetings. I really want to bring a parent's perspective and a parent's voice, but also create a strong partnership between the families, because we're sending our kids off to these schools and we want to be able to trust them. A lot of trust has been lost, unfortunately. And so really want to help build that back and build a strong partnership. And lastly, we want to make sure that we are supporting teachers and helping them to be able to provide a quality, unbiased education. We have kids from all different backgrounds, and they should feel safe and be able to come together in the classroom and learn how to converse despite their differences, learn how to work together, so that they can gain an education and be contributing citizens to our community and our country. So again, Jessica Winger, Board of Education, District 3.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening to be vetted, to see if I can stay in my position. I am the child of native Southerners, one from Wake, one from Chatham, who migrated to New York and had me. I was raised in New York, and because all of my relatives were here, paternal and maternal, I spent a lot of time in Chatham, mostly all my summers up to the age of 13, and I even attended public school here. Otherwise, my upbringing was that I attended private and public schools, colleges, and universities in both places, New York and North Carolina. And I think that my upbringing correlates directly with qualifications for this office because it allowed me to bring a unique and informed perspective about education, what motivates kids to learn, and the pedagogies that teachers employ that are effective to the board. I believe that one of the things that is most valuable to the board is the obligation that I feel, the generational obligation I feel to equip the next generation, the generation that follows me, with the most knowledge and skills and tools that they'll need for the world that they're going to live in, which is going to look vastly different from the world that we live in, just like the world we live in now would look vastly different to our great-grandmothers and grandfathers. So I hope to continue, have one more term on the board or more, so that I can help these kids prepare for their tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Did that light up? Tech support. Okay, now I'm gonna stand down here and ask questions. And actually, Ms. Turner can go right back up there because you're gonna have the first question. Yeah, well, then we're gonna go down the line and everybody's gonna get a chance to go first. So that's okay. Let's see. So what have been and are the effects of COVID-19 on Chatham County schools?
You have to repeat that.
Sorry. What have been and are the effects of COVID-19 on Chatham County schools?
Okay, well, I think that we weathered that storm pretty well. As far as the children are concerned, we've put a lot of social, emotional learning in place for them. We have counselors and what have you. Physically, there hasn't been any effect on our schools because we had updated our ventilation systems. We were in very good shape. We have an excellent maintenance staff that kept our schools clean and what have you. And except for just the lingering fear of this disease keep rebounding as it did for 3 or 4 times. Basically we're in pretty good shape.
Thank you. Ms. Winger?
Right. So what have been and what are the effects of COVID-19? Wow, there really has been a little bit we've overcome, a little bit. There's a lot that we still have to overcome. The main thing that I've really seen is learning loss in our kids. They're making up a lot for it. However, we still have quite a bit behind, and we have data that actually shows us this from recent tests that were completed, end of year tests that completed at the end of last year. There's still so much to make up for. I mean, if you think about it, we had kindergartners who went home halfway through the year. They didn't come back into the classroom until they were in 2nd grade, and those are really formative years when they're learning to read, to write, etc. Also, what occurred with not being in school was behavioral issues. Kids forgot how to be in the classroom, and we had a lot of behavioral issues. So there's a lot of relearning, proper etiquette, listening to a teacher, sitting, being attentive, all those things. They've got to relearn all of that, and we're still working on that. And then lastly, teacher workload has really become a lot because they're trying to make up for everything. Okay.
As far as COVID, one of the things that I'm proud of that we did not have to shut down a school once we came back in-person instruction. We were able to start with K2 students October, I believe, after the spring. We have extra, of course, the government has given us extra money that we've used to hire more staff. MTSS and education loves acronyms. But basically it is someone in each school that helps with extra support for each student as they need the help. We continue to add counselors, social workers. We will continue to do that. And of course, with our summer programs, we have it helped with the slide, and we hope to continue that too. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say that I met with a learning administrator at my granddaughter's school today, and she told me that the biggest issue, as Jessica said, is the gap in learning. There's a huge gap that happened. And that's why they're calling out, maybe even say begging for tutors to come in, which my wife and I are going to go in. I think that's part of what we've learned is that gap in education has to be made up. It's not, you're not just going to pile that in, as we were talking before, and just pass them along every year. We're going to have to deal with that. That's something we're going to have to deal with over the next probably 4 to 5 years. How do we make up that gap for those kids? How do we get them back on track? How do we get them caught up? And it's not, we're not the only ones that have to deal with that. Obviously, the whole country and many countries have to deal with that. But we have to focus that as a real problem and say, how do we go and make that gap up? How do we put assets? How do we put other teachers, educators, tutors to help those kids? Because they'll always be behind if they don't get that kind of help. It affects the entire country, affected all of us, right? So, but it certainly affected the learning ability of our kids. Thank you.
Okay, next question, we're going to start with you, Ms. Winger. Do all Chatham County schools have equal facilities and resources? If not, what can be done about the disparities?
I would definitely say no, they do not. I think there is an effort to make sure we have staff for those schools and the teacher resources. But I mean, driving from one side of the county, the western side, to the eastern side, you will see a big difference, especially because we have some newer schools over here on the eastern side. My kids are going to a brand new high school this year, really exciting. But when you head over to the other side, it's not quite that. So I really think we need to focus a little bit more funds towards maintaining and remodeling or building up those schools on the western side, because I think environment has a big impact, right, on learning. And so I think if we did that, it could really give them a boost, among other things.
Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Let's see, do all Chatham County schools have equal facilities and resources? If not, what can be done about the disparities?
As an educator in Chatham County, I feel like that there were years ago that there were disparities. I do feel like, especially I retired in 2007 from Chatham County Schools, there has been a major push to make sure throughout the county that facilities are repaired, upgraded. I've got a granddaughter that'll be in first grade at Bennett Elementary. Another granddaughter will be a kindergarten at Bennett. Those schools are in great shape. I was by last week. As a matter of fact, been to J.S. Waters. That's one of our older schools. Is clean as a pin and got really nice facilities. We do have newer schools, and you're going to have newer things in newer schools, but we have done a great job, our operations in including all the schools in our county. There's more work to do. Thank you.
Well, I think that the best way to estimate that is based on the results of each of those schools. Not all the schools have the same results. Some schools out in the western area have lower results, which would, to me, would indicate we need to put some more effort into those schools and make sure they have either it's more teachers, more assistant teachers, more educational skills, because the test scores don't indicate that. A level playing field would say that all schools should be testing relatively close to each other, and that's not what we see in the results. So I think we need to look at that and look at how we can help those schools get their test results up and to get that education level up to a better level. Thank you.
Okay, so when we talk about the differences, I wouldn't call them disparities so much because, first of all, as Gary said, a lot of our schools are older. Okay, so that is the result of being underfunded by the state, by the General Assembly. So in terms of capital repairs, that is a problem. The lottery, the education lottery, allocates by law 50% of everything that they get to prizes. Education actually gets 29% of the last 50%, and the rest goes to salaries. So, you know, in terms of capital improvements, that's the problem. Otherwise, we look at all of our children, all of our schools don't want the same things. Some don't want bands, some don't want choirs. So it balances out that way.
What are you? Sorry. What are your thoughts about equitable interventions and consequences for students' misbehaviors in Chatham County schools?
We have worked hard. Actually, at our last board meeting, we just upgraded our code of civility, and that was with administrators, our principals, as those administrators, assistant principals, and central administration to work hard on upgrading the discipline policies to make sure that they fit. We also have worked hard to have interventions in place so that the students are not out of the classroom. As a matter of fact, if you look at our results from short-term suspensions and long-term suspensions from 2019, 2020 until this past year, you'll see quite a lower figure this year. I think we only had about 70 short-term suspensions versus quite a few more in 2019, 20. Thank you.
So I think honestly, that's an element that needs to be looked at pretty hard. If we just think back in the last 6 months, some of the news stories that we've heard, that some of the activities that have gone on in our local schools. I won't bring them up because they're pretty severe. But obviously, I think we need to look at that program and how we are administering corrective action for those students. Because if that kind of activity is going on and we see it in the news, that means it's probably more of it going on behind the scene. And I think we need to support our teachers. They need to know that when they call for help and there's a problem with a student or problem in a classroom, that they know that that's going to be dealt with and dealt with fairly and not be a disruption to the class, right? So I think that's pretty important. Otherwise, those stories would not have made the press and would not have happened and not come out in the news. So I think it's something we need to review and look at.
Okay, so in terms of discipline, we had policies that came down from the state as to how we should deal with discipline. We have the authority to mitigate those policies, and that's what we just did. We changed our student code of conduct, which for kids means another rule, to student code of civility, which puts that word in their lexicon, and hopefully they will act on it. And we have looked at the levels. We take all kinds of mitigations into account, particularly age and grade. So we're doing the best that we can in terms of, we have been working on it for a long time. Like Gary mentioned, in 2019, there were like 600 short-term suspensions. In 2021, there were only 75. So we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Okay, so the question was about equitable consequences, correct?
What are your thoughts about equitable interventions and consequences for students' misbehaviors in Chatham?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for repeating that. As was stated, we have the code of conduct in schools, or code of civility as it's now called. They just reevaluated that. I also think while changing that code, it also comes down to ensuring that the teachers and the staff are aware of how to handle those situations, are trained properly, read the code of conduct, understand, or code of civility, I've got to learn that now, and understand how to approach it and use it in those situations in the schools. As always, these are children. They do make mistakes. There should be consequences, but things can be taken on a case-by-case basis, looking at all sides of what occurred. But really, once handing out, discipline, it's also making sure that we use it as a teaching moment, right? All come from different homes, different backgrounds. So really ensuring that we are teaching them and helping them through those difficult situations.
Let's see. So Mr. Moore's going first. Tell us your thoughts about Chatham County schools and what some call critical race theory.
Well, I think speaking of critical race theory, and it has many other acronyms, let's call it diversity, inclusion. I think as I mentioned before, I think more important right now is the education excellence that we focus on, not trying to solve all the world's social problems in our schools or through our children, so to speak. There's a lot of social problems we have, a lot of politics, let's call it, that's going on in the world that doesn't necessarily impact or have a flow through the schools. Again, the most important thing we can focus on is not that our kids understand the difference between equity and equality, but they understand and they're able to read and write and do math at a very high level and compete with the rest of the world. That's the most important part, because we're not competing right now. We're way behind many parts of the world, and we're falling further behind.
I'm gonna get confused. Yeah, so it's yeah, right.
Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, critical race theory is just a conversation. It's no more of a big deal than America discussing how women working affects home life in American society. Okay, it's a conversation, but it is not a conversation that I want for my kids in Chatham County School right now. It is a college conversation. And they will have that when they get into college. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. As they call CRT, critical race theory, anti-racism theory. It's a very controversial, very touchy subject. I actually agree with Ms. Turner on that. I don't believe it has a place in our K through 12 schools. Our children are so malleable and they come from different families. And this is public education. And so I really believe that it's not the right place and the right setting for that. I absolutely strongly believe that racism has no place in our schools or in our community. So we do need to make an effort to make sure that that is the focus, but choosing to respect all viewpoints, especially when it comes to very particular and specific anti-racism viewpoints like critical race theory. Right, thank you.
I would believe that we need to focus on the social, emotional needs of our children. I feel like we have done that and continue to do that. Each student comes to us from different homes, different backgrounds, and we need to teach so that they understand that we're supposed to treat each other well in whatever we do. Thank you.
Okay, and we have one more question because Mr. Stickney would have gone first on this, but we'll do this and then we'll turn to audience questions. And again, the Zoom people can start to type their questions into the chat. What are your thoughts about safety and security in Chatham County schools? I think we start again with you. Yeah.
Okay, well, safety and security, we have had so many trainings on safety and security for the last 3 years, I think. I mean, our staff goes like every 2 or 3 weeks, is it Gary, to trainings in Raleigh and all that. We've had meetings with sheriff's department, so on and so forth. We have security at all of our schools. There's only one entrance into our schools. We have drills and all that kind of thing, but as far as our safety and security is concerned, we feel very confident that we can protect our children.
So safety and security in our schools, that's a really, it's a tender subject. I'm sending my kids off to school every day and I do not want to be worried about their safety at school. And with recent events, yeah, there's that little thought that creeps in, that something could happen. I agree that our schools are very safe. I think there's one area that I really think would like to advocate for when I become a board member is for, so right now our SO, our safety officers at our schools are funded through grants and they're actually not state funded. So we have to vie for them with other schools. And I do not think that's okay. I absolutely believe that the state should be funding that so that we can have more safety officers. So they're not having to share among schools. And I really think that would help give that extra boost of security at our schools, along with all the other things that they are doing.
We were fortunate. We contracted with a group out of Virginia about 4 years ago. And please pardon me if I mess up on a year, because COVID has changed my thinking on years wise. But about 4 years ago, they came down, they stayed a week, went through all of our schools, consulting firm, safety wise, that went through, and we had a head start on some of this. We continue to contract with them. They actually, Mr. Blyce and Tracy Fowler just had a training with them. It's been about 3 weeks ago. We continue to meet with all of our stakeholders at all of our schools to monitor and try to make sure they know what our safety plans are. They've got different books that they use in different situations, binders. Thank you.
Yes, my feeling is on safety and security, there's two elements, right? There's the safety that needs to be looked at, and Marcus Globuschutz is in the back, who's a candidate for sheriff. He would agree with this. We need to invest more in those resource safety officers, those sheriff's departments. You feel safe until something happens. I'm sure Uvalde probably felt safe to some level until it happened, right? But we have to, I hate to say it, you have to hope for the best, but you still have to plan for the worst. And we need that safety and security in our schools. We need to invest in that. And unfortunately, it does require law enforcement, because they are the most equipped and best trained to be able to handle that. And then we also have to be real with ourselves. We have to understand that our kids are always in danger because of things that are going on. And I'm going beyond the safety. There's the drugs that are in our communities that the sheriffs need to look at. There's there's fentanyl that's coming into our state. They just made another bust here the last few weeks. And then, unfortunately, we look at all the other things that are going on with our children in terms of mental health. We have to help our children in that area. Thank you.
All right, now it's your turn. Oh, okay. Well, Tina is going to take these around. Do that first.
Judy Graham, I believe, is asking this question of all of you. We all speak of more money, acknowledging the value of teachers. How can we significantly increase our cadre of highly qualified teachers who want to teach in Chatham County?
You go first, I guess. Okay, so the question was about how can we better attract more teachers, attract highly qualified. Wow, there is a teacher shortage, as there are many shortages right now. There is a teacher shortage. And actually, if we look at the statistics of teachers coming or individuals enrolling in higher education to become teachers, that enrollment has gone way down. I cannot remember the exact, but it's gone way down over the last 12 years. So we know that not enough are going to come out of the schools. So here in Chatham County, what we have to do, we have to look not just outside of our county, we have to look outside of the state, right? And not only funding our teachers appropriately, we also need to be supporting them in the classroom, make sure they have substitutes, have teachers' aides, have all those resources that they need, because when you create that strong, positive environment for them, they're going to thrive and they're going to want to be there in our schools. Okay.
With the county commissioners, the supplement continues to be increased. It has actually in September, I believe, our staff will receive a bonus for being hired by us, staying with us, retention bonus. We have continued back last year. We also did that. We are offering bonuses to our teachers, to our employees, if they bring a teacher into our system. They make money. Actually, I talked to one the other day that had brought 3 and was still looking. So we're doing all that, but we also have a program, Teach Chatham, that hopes to be started this year, where we're taking our high school students and getting them an education background where they can come in and teach for us to come, to guarantee us a couple of years there. So we're hoping to do that too.
So when we talk about education and we say we value education, how can we say we value education when we pay a teacher the same as a shift manager at McDonald's, right? We have to look at pay. So let me give you an example. I come from the logistics background. I would say 20 years ago, a truck driver probably made $45,000 a year. A truck driver, 6 weeks of training makes $80,000 a year right now. So where has our teacher funding kept up with that? And the other things that are happening in, and we'll call it the business world with basic pay. We need to pay teachers better. If we say we value education, we have to pay our teachers better. That will make them want to get into the field, right? To make somebody go through 4 years of education, training, and college to come out and pay them $45,000, $50,000, or $55,000 a year is crazy, right? We can do better, right? We need to look at our budgets. No dollar should be spent on a football stadium until we've figured out how do we pay our teachers better. We shouldn't put any money towards some fancy education program or computer program until we figure out how to pay our teachers better. It's crazy that we pay them as little as we do. We got to pay our teachers better.
I agree with everything that everybody said, but I also want to look at the fact that in Chatham County schools, our retention rate is the highest in the state. 92% of our teachers say that their working conditions are favorable because we look out for them. This past week, I attended a gathering of substitutes. I think there were about 40 new substitutes that we have, and 35 new teachers, young teachers that will be around for a long time. So I do believe that I don't think we can pay teachers a salary commensurate with what they do. They shape civilization. See, but we need to take our voice to the legislature to demand more money for them.
Excuse me. Hello, I'm Ann Turnbull, and I am here in several capacities, but one is as a member of the NAACP Chatham Community Chapter. That chapter has produced a document that I brought to each of you because I know you're going to be speaking to that chapter in September. And I thought you would want to read the document that they have produced under the leadership of David Delaney and a group of other people that looks at the disparities in discipline and suspensions according to race. And some of the figures are Black students and students with disabilities are 4 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Economically disadvantaged students are 2.5 times more likely to be suspended. Chatham, as compared to the state, is 1.5 times higher for Black students in terms of criminal acts and 1.5 times higher for English learners for criminal acts. And then we talked about school disparities. Jordan Matthews is 3 times higher than Chatham Central and Northwood in suspensions. Pittsburgh Elementary 3 times higher than Siler City and 2 times higher than Virginia Cross. So there are a lot of concerns about what's happening to our students. And this report, which I brought to you, is a comprehensive analysis of our challenges with recommendations. And one of the major recommendations is 90% reduction in suspensions within the next year. We know from research that suspensions don't teach appropriate behavior. Some people have called it an antisocial turning point that leads to lower grades, missed days of school, dropout. So I want to give you this report, saying how glad we are that you'll be coming to the meeting, ask you to read it and to respond in terms of whether you can commit to that 90% reduction. Thank you so much.
We have the kids ready. I'm just going to wait till she finishes passing them out. I'm concerned when I read about school boards that ban certain books in the library. And I would like to know your position on banning books.
Yeah, we're good. I think that's right. Thank you for the question. We have several things in place. If someone has a question on a book that has to go through the process to ban a book, I do not agree that, I'm a former language arts teacher. I really believe literature is a wonderful thing for all students. And I feel like that with the processes we have in place right now with our Ms. Bratton and our library committee and our schools committees, that they go through the process. If a book is deemed unnecessary, then or has information in it doesn't need to be in there in the library or in the classroom, then it is removed. But right now, since I've been on the board, very, very few books have ever been banned in Chatham County schools, but thank you.
Well, I think this is a topic that runs across the country, right? We're hearing it in all over the country, and it does raise concerns. I think the process of, yes, having people review it, but I think the most important part, because that's where I think a lot of the noise is coming from, is the parents. The parents should be involved in that committee that has a voice, right? We can't have just the education system or the educators saying, this is what needs to happen. The parents say, well, I was never told, I was never included, I was never mentioned, I was never asked, right? So I think if we include the parents, I think you'll have a much better response from them rather than dictating and saying, these are the books we're going to put in the library and you can like it or not like it. I think the parents should have a voice. They should be part of that committee, that decision making, at least say, hey, we agree, we don't agree. I think it's more of the push down effect is probably what strikes them harder. Thank you.
I'm a parent and I wouldn't want to be interfering in the education that my children are supposed to have. Education is just that, education. Whatever it is in the world that they need to be exposed to, they should be exposed to. And educators are not going to expose children to anything that is lewd, lascivious, or, that's not age appropriate. But what is happening in the world around them, children deserve to know. They are. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as I'm on the board, there will be no book banning.
All right. Yeah, we have seen a lot of book banning going on in schools. I think when I think about it, I love that we have freedom of speech, freedom of press. I think that is extremely important and we should value that. I do, however, believe that we need to ensure that we have age appropriateness in our schools. And so that to me is more of the concern. It's not that we need to get everything. It's that we need to make sure that, a first grader is not reading things that might be only appropriate for a middle schooler, high schooler. And so I think that needs to be important. And I actually do believe that ultimately, when it comes to sensitive subjects, that it is up to the parents to decide when that child is ready for that. And that the schools are following the state guidelines given to them on those subjects as far as what they need to follow and what they should be teaching in the classrooms.
Yes, I'm Donna Stewart. I was just wondering, given the role of parents' rights and the interest in that, how you would propose to expand or increase the role of parents in dealing with these guidelines for curriculum and student activities?
Well, it's interesting. There's a bill that has been introduced. Senate passed the bill, House passed the bill, HB 755. You all can go and look it up. And it addresses this whole issue of parents' rights. And it turns out that what was asked for in the bill, parents already have. They already have them. They get all kinds of notifications about health checkups. Some teachers in the lower grades, the K-3, send home papers at the end of each week telling parents what their children are going to be involved with in the next week in every area, social studies, math, what they're going to be reading, and so on and so forth. All teachers don't do that. I'm not sure if we should require that all teachers do it, but parents get enough information. And so that bill, which probably won't pass because they do have all of that information. One thing that they did ask for that the federal government prohibits is disrupting a child's education by taking them out of classes that, taking them out of the curriculum that has been set up by the school.
All right, so like I said in my opening statement, I really want to build a strong partnership. And actually in our own school board's policy code, it specifically mentions that parent engagement, that the Board of Education needs to recognize the value of parent engagement, of family engagement, and that it needs to be an ongoing cooperation between home and school. A lot of the reason why I'm running is because I didn't feel that. And there are many others who feel that same way. So what do I want to do to change that? How do I want to build that up? Parent advisory board that can meet with the superintendent. Currently, they've started a new parent advisory board, but invitation only. One parent from each school. Not anybody can apply to be on it. And so I think that really needs to be open to everybody to be a part of that, who wants to have constructive criticism, but also who really is seeking to help improve our schools and to be able to look at those things like curriculum and have a say in that. And like I said, partnership, working together, not one over the other, but partnership.
I was fortunate to grow up in Chatham County where the parents helped me. So many times I needed help on different projects, different things for our school to, whether it be playground, whatever. And they did a wonderful job of trying to come in and work with me. Ms. Winger mentioned the parent advisory group. Dr. Jackson is starting that up. He also plans on a student advisory group, and he is starting again with the teacher advisory group, trying to hear from as many positive or as many people as he possibly can in the community so that we can continue to move our school system forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I too would agree that the parent advisory committee is probably a good start, but it needs to be much broader. One of the bigger complaints that I hear from teachers is there's not enough parent engagement, but once you get parents engaged, maybe they'll have more involvement in their kids' education. They have to have that voice. They need to feel that they have a place to go and express that voice. It can't be one from each school. Maybe it should be 30 or 40 from each school. I don't know what the right number is, but it needs to be a much broader group, and not everybody's going to get their way. but at the same time, it needs to be more focused on parents' input. Because again, the biggest complaint I hear is parents are not involved enough. You got to get them at least to know what's going on before they can get involved, right? And to them, I think it's still a little bit of a black hole. They don't know what's going on in the schools. They need to really understand. And maybe if they hear the reason why there's a particular education process going through and they understand it better, they'll be more engaged and more involved.
Thank you all for coming tonight. As a retired teacher of Chatham County. As a retired teacher of Chatham County, I never learned how to use a microphone. I would like to hear through your eyes and your ears what it would be like to see what an unbiased classroom is like, or you can choose a biased classroom. Either one. What would it sound like and what would it look like?
I like to get my thoughts down. Okay, what an unbiased classroom or a biased classroom. I'm going to choose unbiased because I put that on my, saw you holding my flyer. What's an unbiased classroom? Okay, our children come from different backgrounds. They come from different political homes, all different, right? When they come into the classroom, we may not know initially where they come from and where they stand. I think a teacher looking each child in the eyes, greeting them, learning their name, showing them that love and interest is absolutely essential. I think many of our teachers do that, but it's even going beyond that because issues are going to arise. Things are going to come up. I'll hurry up. Okay, so man, that minute is quick. I'm sorry. I think it's ensuring that we use certain techniques to deal with those difficult situations, conflict resolution, teaching them, using it as a teaching moment, learning about forgiveness, okay? Being willing to ask for forgiveness, but also being willing to forgive someone as well. Their children, we want to help mold them to be strong citizens who can respect all viewpoints.
I can't unbiased also. I've always believed that you take children from where they are to where they need to be. And I think you do that by treating them with respect. I'm a great believer in restorative practices. I used it a lot when I was teaching. I feel like students learn what they need to do, that if they have done something incorrectly, as far as behavior wise, those are things restorative practice works wonderfully. Not punitive practice, but restorative, so that they understand. I feel like that, each student is different, and our job is to make sure we find what we need to do with each of those children to move them forward.
Yeah, I too will choose the unbiased classroom. I think the unbiased classroom doesn't focus on just one way to teach. There's not just one way to teach. Teachers have a lot of skills, a lot of background that will allow them to use that in the way they teach. I think respect, number one, it needs to be brought in. Respect, number one, to the teacher. I think teacher is a role where education is or educator is a skill. The teacher runs the classroom, and it needs to be understood that it is her or his classroom, and that respect needs to be foremost, right? We respect the teacher. And then second is we respect those that are in authority that run that school and manage that, right? Because that's very important. If we don't have that, then we don't have a system, right? If everybody thinks that my voice is the only voice that matters, that doesn't make sense, right? Respect for the teachers and respect for the education system is number one.
For me, an unbiased classroom means that every child has an opportunity to have an identity, to see him or herself in the textbooks, in the stories, in the activities that they do, in the discussions that they have, be it history, be it English, be it even math. Okay, because the problem with the curriculum in the public schools, and that's one of the flaws that we have that hopefully we're going to be working on this year too, is that children of color don't get to see themselves either in their classrooms teaching or in the stories that they read, the history that they learn. And they all have contributed to their ancestries, have contributed to this country, but they don't know that. And that does not help Caucasian children either, because it gives them a sense of entitlement that screws up the situation. So that's it.
So my question has to do with some of the other questions that have been asked. When I take my son to the doctor, I don't tell the doctor how to treat my son. I have respect for the doctor as a professional. The concept of parents telling teachers how to behave themselves and what to teach doesn't make sense to me, because I have respect for teachers as professionals. Mr. Moore, you just spoke about students having respect for teachers. The same has to be true for parents. Sure. I'd like somebody to explain why, what the difference is between a parent having concern for their children in school and interfering with what the teacher does.
Again, as a former educator, I had a lot of parents that I've known and dealt with and was able to work through most. I'm sure there were some that didn't like me. There were some students that didn't like me also, but we also could find common ground where they allowed me to teach their child and do the best I can. And as I said, taking them from where they're at to move forward. I feel like in our county, we still have a lot of that. I know we talked about school board. There have been school board meetings in other parts of the country that there wasn't a lot of respect. I feel like our school board meetings, our community showed us respect. And I feel like that's just something that we'll hopefully continue. I'm a big advocate for our staff.
Hi, I have 4 daughters and, I'm sorry.
It's my fault. It's my fault.
So I agree. I think respect for the teachers is, as I said before, is the most important part, right? And I think, and you're right, I trust a doctor, but if my child went in and had something removed and came back out and I wasn't consulted, I wasn't asked, I wasn't even brought into the conversation, I might be a little worried about that. So again, I think as long as you engage the parents, it's like Gary says, be very engaged. So they have any questions, you answer their questions. I think that's important because again, the biggest complaint I hear is non-involvement from the parents. Once you engage them, maybe they'll feel like they have a little bit of say and they're not going to try to change. I don't think, well, some of them might, but you just say, hey, we're not here. It's not your school. Your name's not outside. But I think if you engage them more, they'll feel like they're more part of the process.
Here I have one's a near genius, and she's now a full professor at the University of New Mexico. A 4th one was a dropout from almost everything, and we're constantly struggling with her. So what is the age appropriateness of children in school? If there is a standard thing to march to age appropriate, how does a genius
And how does a person with handicapped ability deal along with this marching step?
Each child.
When you're
learning. You're determining curriculum. You spoke about age appropriate.
I'll respond to that. So I mean, age appropriateness, we have age appropriateness with movies. We have ratings on movies. We have age appropriateness with places that children can go because we have laws. So age appropriateness, yeah, it is extremely challenging to determine exactly what's age appropriateness. I think in determining curriculum, books, specifically those things, I think to err on the side of caution, because and this is where I think parent involvement is important in at least discussing what those and getting their perspective on it. Like I said, it's not about parents taking over, because that's not, we are not the ones who have studied education and have dug deep like our administrators have and our school teachers have. It's absolutely important to respect them and have that conversation with them. So parent aware. So if there are things that maybe we don't think is appropriate for a child that's going to be taught, it's letting parents know ahead of time so we can opt out if needed, or we can dig deeper into that curriculum. I think that's where it becomes important. Partnership is saying, hey, we're going to cover this. If you don't feel your child's ready, here's the opt out. We'll have another option for them. There are very few cases where I actually feel like that applies. It's very specific cases. I don't think in general that is a problem in our schools. Said very, very specific occurrences when that needs to be addressed.
Any other questions?
Can I answer that one? Okay, that's okay, no problem. Personalized education, and our teachers do a wonderful job of trying to make sure they personalize it for each individual student. Some need higher level, others need certain work. Actually, I read an article the other day that said that sometimes when you take the curriculum down, students don't grow as much when they're behind. So we need to make sure that our curriculum is pushing them and continue to do that. But I also think that one of the things we need to do, we have an opt-out program, and as there are certain things in our curriculum that we have opt-outs for, that they have an opportunity to, the parents can opt out of that too.
Okay, let's make this the last question. And I told them that people might want to talk to them if they're willing to stick around after we close up. Okay, there's two people. So this is a young man.
Hi, my name is Carlton. I live in Eastern Chatham County, New Hope Precinct. And in light of the question about CRT, I would like to know how whichever candidates are willing and able to answer this, how do you define critical race theory? Because I know different people have different definitions and think of it in different ways, and that informs whether they support or oppose it on a political stage.
Okay, so like I said, it's a conversation similar to when you're talking about how certain things affect this society, American society. So I would think the critical race theory would look at how race has played into the overall economics, politics, education of America. That's how.
That's it. And as a former social studies teacher, I believe you have to teach history as history. And I don't think, my freshman year in high school, Chatham County Schools, well, that was the first full desegregation. And of course, students and I had several conversations about how things were then. And of course, they couldn't believe some of the things that went on at that time. But I still believe that, you know, critical race theory is, you know, the systemic racism and the different things. I don't think that's being taught in Chatham County schools. I do think that we need to take history as history and make sure that we know what happened so that if it's something that was bad, we don't repeat it. That's if it's something we can learn by, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree. It is a conversation. I think where it gets to be a little bit of a problem when it becomes the curriculum, right? And it's driving the entire conversation of the country around whatever we want to call it, pigeonholing entire groups of people based on somebody's personal beliefs. You're right. History is history. We need to teach it. It is the truth. We don't avoid it, but it doesn't mean we have to go and push ideology in our classrooms. It's not the place for our classrooms. Again, we can focus on enough things: reading, comprehension, writing, and math. If we can get those things to our kids, they'll be further ahead than they are today, right? Because only about 50% are doing it at grade level, even in this county. That's what we need to focus on. If we get that, then at least we give them the skills they can go out and at least achieve something, provide for themselves in life. At this point, a lot of them can't do that, whether it's by race or not by race or whatever. 50% of our students are not graduating at their level, right? So we need to focus on that.
Yeah, I think what I would say to that is very much what has been said, you know, a full history being taught, you know, that covers everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? We lived overseas for 2 years and learning the bloody history of England, and, you know, that you see the good and the bad everywhere. In any country, we all have that. So making sure that we hold on to that so that we don't need to gloss over the negative. We need to make sure we are teaching the truth, but also, yeah, just as Gary said, ensuring that we are focusing on our children understanding each other, working together, and helping them to be successful wherever they come from, you know, in their lives.
So I think we all recognize how much time and energy and money and driving around, talking to people, whatever, all of these candidates have put into this because it's public service and community service. And I think we're all very grateful for your willing to be candidates. Our next meeting, you can all read. Our next meeting on Tuesday, September 27th is going to be the Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress, Senator Ben Clark. And it will also be on Zoom and recorded. The candidates have put some of their campaign materials over there on that table. And there's also some information about Ben Clark. So we are adjourned for tonight, and thank you all for coming.